The Mansuet is thought to be one of the most imposing breeds of earthen colossi in the known universe. Easy to tame and very protective of their masters. For some odd reason or another, I found myself in their presence, probably for a masochistic study session. The colossi of the many realms they inhabit are often quite friendly to humans, though some are trained to defend the many lines that manifest along these realms. The Mansuet is a stocky breed, standing no taller than a village inn. They aren't very common in the more populated realms, as they are also known to be quite aggressive. I found myself standing in the Stuck, where I was faced at lock switch point by a roughneck and his colossi companion. I had never actually been to the Stuck before. The magic does most of the work when I travel the dimensions. This time, for whatever reason, I fell into a farmstead between worlds. Studying the colossi was quite uninspired. A large enough creature, the Mansuet was made of the rocks of the opaque realm. Small crystalline hairs grew from the spherical rocks that made up the creature's body. Its eyes were that of a typical colossi, round gemstones socketed into the boulder's head. This species is separated to its cousins by the crystalline brows that give them an angry look. It was typical for Mansuet owners to grind the shoulder spikes off of the creatures, and this one was no different. I had thought at first that the man would be unhappy to see a trespasser on his property. He was shaking and could barely keep the side of his lock switch straight. He was sweating and stood with one arm clutched to his stomach. A sly smirk was glued to his face, and even his pet could barely hold back its twinged movements. I regaled him in how I came upon this area, and the smile had left his face as quickly as it arrived. He told the golem to stand down, and I was offered hospitality at his abode further into the plane. I don't visit the Stuck very often, so I was shocked to find anything here more than a blank, opaque, infinite space. Traveling through the realm to where this man was leading me revealed the vast environment that was housed here. From the almost seemingly flat landscape I had entered from, the land changed dramatically. The opaque fog of the Stuck gave way to a valley of rock and crystal that made up the colossi the man brought with him. It was beautiful. The crystal field seemed to stretch into infinity. We talked a little on the journey, and he told me about the Stuck and its denizens. The Mansuet also seemed to warm up to my existence. He would break up the crystals along the road and bring me a few. Heading into the valley was an enlightening experience. From the overlook, the land appeared fertile and teeming with life. The crystalline birds that flew in picturesque formations were gaunt and watched the limping homesteader with great interest as we passed. The colorful flora I spied from the view appeared as nothing more than colored runoff from what once looked like a lake. This pattern continued on for the entirety of the journey. Our trio would crest a hill or swing around a crevasse, only to find more environmental facades. We walked on for quite a while before we stopped in a clearing. Not so different in aesthetic to the rest of the other parts of this in-between, we stopped to rest as the man said we were only halfway to our destination. Here is where our story takes a turn, and going forward, only truth shall be revealed. In that clearing between worlds, I shall admit, not many live here. Magically, it is a space in flux. Powers are used to stretch and bend the space to make travel a simple task. Experiments upon the Stuck have revealed that the space can be stabilized for a time. News of this new science excited would-be settlers, and many moved into the space ready to work this newfound infinite frontier. That is the extent to my knowledge about the region. In the clearing surrounded by these crystals and this simple construct, we talked. He talked. The injured man spoke about this region and the creatures that inhabited it, from the simple buzzards that wait for their prey to weaken before attacking them, to the rare slaughter rose that creeps through the many canyons feasting on the unsuspecting. The Stuck was filled with a full ecosystem unknown to me, and probably to most. He told me of the Stuck itself, the way it acts, the way the crystals shift and ebb when the world outside has need of them. The Mansuet had calmed from its skittering around the area, eyeing and peering at the formations and flora. It crossed its rocky legs, sitting next to its owner, and bowed its head sleepily. There was no real way to keep time in the Stuck. No celestial positions to track, and no clock to reference outside of personal timekeeping. Even personal clocks could not be compared, as every comparison would be more wildly different than the last. I asked the man about the Colossus and his relationship to the creature. He prefaced that he was not the one to grind down the big fellow's shoulders, but rather, the now defunct Mill had done as such. At the remembrance of the mill, the man's shoulders stiffened, and he clutched the 3-cycle a little tighter. He noticed his tensity, and his shoulders dropped a little. Apologizing, the beatnik explained his memory, his rage. The Stuck had a recent problem with milling. Man-sweats were quite common as the industry was targeting the new settlers who wanted to defend their property. He talked about how, day after day, he would read about these stories, and bought his lock switch with the intention of breaking into one of these mills to break up the businesses. Just then, a blue flower with an emerald bloom wandered into the clearing. The Stucklander jumped from the crystal he was seated at. He racked his lock switch, flipped the side out, primed one of the 3 cylinders, aimed, and fired. An explosion of black fire ripped through the air, and an arc of red voltaic lightning followed the pyroclastic plume toward the creature. An explosion of rocks sent crystals up into the air, and I fell backwards, covering my head from the debris. Another blast, this time a larger crystal chunk landing square on my chest, knocking the wind out of me. My ears rang, and I lifted myself from the opaque rubble I was buried beneath. The air was smoky, and when I rose, I saw the now scarlet-bloomed slaughter rose skittering away in fright. The man had also been pushed back over his rock, legs stretched skyward. I began to walk over to his position when I noticed the colossi lying on its side, one of its arms completely blown off. The air was filled with smoke, ash, and rock shards. The thick air filled my nose, and I sneezed. Black snot shot out from my nose, and I wiped the leftover onto my sleeve. The sneeze jostled the injured man's sweat awake. Still reeling from the action, the colossi sat for a moment, whimpering and clutching its now empty shoulder. I recomposed myself, checking for any missing body parts. There were burn holes in my cloak. Soot and the ash stained the purpleware. Some of the page tips in my spellbook were blackened from burning. My chest ached in tension with my movement, but I was still together. I coughed through the smoke and peered over to where the Stucklander had been sitting. His eyes were wide and empty, his mouth stuck open, and the lock switch blown to bits. The Type 88 lock switch was a masterful feat of engineering. The model sports a 3-round cylinder able to hold .88 volcano slugs, a simple percussion cap loader for easy loading, rough sightings, and a wide-mouth barrel for hitting everything. 300 years ago, this model was fabricated by one of the most powerful empires at the time. It was unique in its sheer power, able to cut through the largest constructs with ease. Most of these models are kept as collector's items now. Though the historical context of such a foul tool often flies over the heads of their owners, the lock switches are still a prized item to this day. Some collectors find it isn't enough to simply look at such a fine work of magical engineering and run off to shoot some unsuspecting earth golem. When not kept in proper condition, the models were notorious for backfiring. If grime built up around the firing cell, the preceding lightning would arc backwards, cycling the cylinder. The firing cell would then absorb the magic, pulling in the energy through whichever shell was loaded, exploding the shot at the user. It would seem my acquaintance hadn't read the user manual. The colossi stood shaking, whimpering. It shuffled over to its now dead companion, nudging the body. Lifting the body with its remaining arm, it carried him further along the path out of the clearing. I followed it out of curiosity. Another trip around crevasses and over crystal patches, until finally, after what felt like an hour or so, we arrived at a house. The house was sorely out of place. Its architecture resembled that of an eschaton villa, located in a more warm, salty, sea breeze-based environment. The small mansion was surrounded by a large vine lattices that hosted many species of grapes and berries. The mad sweat tore through the villa entrance, throwing berries and shards of wood. The creature collapsed on the cobblestone pathway, tossing the lifeless corpse onto the porch. I stepped through the path the colossus tore through. The mad sweat was gone now, its body broken into small pieces of rock and gem, matching its owner lying as a mess of bone and flesh upon the front porch. At this point, such chaos was familiar to me, and I decided to look around the area before the Stuck swallowed it again. Peering through one of the front windows to the villa revealed a mass collection of objects and boxes. The door was blasted open from the earthen creature's rampage. The air inside the entrance hall was stale and dusty. The rooms and spaces were all designed pretty similarly. Large, tall ceilings, trinkets, boxes stacked and cluttered. In one of the rooms, a uniform caught my eye. It was a long purple trench coat adorned with a triple roundel pins on the collar. I couldn't quite remember where in my memory I stored such a striking outfit. I searched in the pocket and found an identification tag. The ID listed a plethora of information: name, birthday, rank. Then I spotted the corporate name along the card, a private military corporation that was notorious for botching intergovernmental contracts. I placed the card back into the coat pocket and left.